then we don't have to worry about not dying because we know that when we go home, we have lovely parents who can take care of us and cook our food, right?
Right. Okay, but imagine if you had to stay at school from 8 a.m. till 3 a.m. every day, working, and with no holidays. And substitute school for work, and that is reality in Japan. Approximately 25% of men in their 30s work 60 or more hours a week, and the real number is actually estimated to be much, much higher. And 2/3 of men work 20 plus hours of unpaid overtime every month. And this is all with an average of about 9 days of break a year, if any.
So take the case of this YouTube video that we found. His name is Sayota Nakahara, and he said, I used to come to work by 8:40 a.m. and worked all day, finish around 3, sleep for a few hours before getting up around 7. So he worked like this for nearly 2 years, and eventually he became ill. He continued in the video. I couldn't tell what day it was or which season. The only thing I could see was the entrance of the company. I could not register the scenery around me. Everything was blurred. At work, I could only see the computer on my desk. I could not hear any sound around me, and my vision was really narrow. I could not even hear my boss talking to me, who was sitting right behind me. He once had to kick my chair and yell to get my attention.
This type of extreme working culture results in karoshi, or karojisatsu, which mean death or suicide by work, respectively. The main causes of death by karoshi include hemorrhages in the brain or heart attacks. And there are an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 number of deaths from karoshi each year, which is the same number of deaths by car accidents in Japan. And the phenomenon of karojisatsu, which is suicide by overwork, has become so common that people have become desensitized.
So, in our interview with Mr. Chan, who had lived in Japan for a number of years, he recounted how people were unfazed when suicide occurred as people jumped in front of the train. Whenever a suicide will occur, the electronic banner on the train will flash accident in multiple languages, and then no one in the train will even bat an eye because it happens so often.
One morbid fact is that train companies have actually been taking families to court for disrupting the trains when a family member jumps in front of a train to commit suicide. And this line, the Chuo Rapid line, is the most popular line for suicide, potentially because it charges the least amount to families.
So history of karoshi goes all the way back to 1960s, when the first case of karoshi was reported in 1969 with the death from a stroke of 29-year-old married male worker in the shipping department of Japan's largest newspaper company. It wasn't until 1970s when actually the problem of karoshi became most prominent, when the number of Japanese men working over 60 hours a week increased greatly during the economic boom. The media then began picking up on the new phenomena, and this new phenomena was quickly labeled as karoshi. The trend of karoshi is triggered from Japan's rise from the devastation of World War II to economic prominence in the post-World War decades. During this period, Japanese employees were often dismissed, or they were required to work in very strict conditions. These full-time workers were forced to obey whatever orders they were given, and no matter how harsh it was, they were forced to follow. Although this extreme working condition helped propel Japan in an economic superpower, they couldn't recognize that employees couldn't work 12 or more hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week for years and years repeatedly without suffering physical or mental health.
So since the 1980s, the Japanese government has legally recognized karoshi as a cause of death. If a death is recognized as karoshi, surviving family members may receive compensation of $20,000 a year from the government, and sometimes up to $1 million from the company in damages. But the problem is, a lot of these cases are not recognized as karoshi. And so, why would the Japanese workers work themselves into such a deep, miserable pit like that?
Well, statistic-wise, we believe that during the long-term recession after the collapse of bubble economy of Japan, many companies cut back on the numbers of employees, but however, the total amount of work did not decrease. So that just automatically forces other employees to work harder and longer hours until midnight and often work on their holidays even. However, the true problem lies in the culture itself. Japan is known to have a workaholic culture, or sometimes we refer to Japan as the country with lifetime employment system. As their work is a source of honor and their pride, Japanese workers have very, very high company loyalty. So even those extra evenings hours where it wasn't very productive or they aren't getting paid for the extra hours they work, they will still appear in the company just to show their company that they have full company spirit. This root of loyalty concept is from Japanese culture of defining how much of a responsible adult you are based on how much you prioritize your company work.
So another major reason is due to financial stress and job insecurity. So as we enter college, we have the dilemma of going into a stable major to ensure a well-paying job in the future. But likewise, the Japanese workers face the same pressure of not only finding a job, but also keeping that job. And there's always someone else to take their place, hence the term disposable workers, which refer to Japanese corporate workers. So the man from our first example, Sayota Nakahara, said, "I was afraid that once I lost my full-time job, my life would be destroyed. The only job available for me will be something at the bottom of society. Then I would plunge into poverty, and that's the end of my life." So this type of thinking is quite prevalent throughout society, and I'm sure that we ourselves are no stranger to it. I mean, everyone's worried about job security, right? But the phenomenon of karoshi and karojisatsu shows how extreme the workers' perspectives have become.
So what has the government been doing about this issue? Well, in the beginning, sadly, they weren't doing much. So in case of Kazuko Kanameda, who died of a heart attack in 1988 after working 2 shifts a day, which is 14 to 16 hours a day. His wife had proved that Mr. Kanameda died from overwork in order to receive compensation. And it was only more than 2 years later that officials recognized his death as a result of overwork karoshi.
So in more recent years, however, the Japanese government has been working on improving the problem of karoshi, as the declining birth rate and low economic productivity has brought this issue to their attention. And another proposed improvement by the government is to mandate that workers take at least 5 days of paid holiday a year. So this is actually quite a significant step because a study found that 16% of Japanese workers took no paid holidays in 2013. And another poll found that 1/3 of men working for private companies in Tokyo or Osaka worked more than 12 hours a day. And however, only half were paid for overtime. And many said that their bosses and the harsh environments in the office discouraged or even prevented them from claiming their entitlements. Thankfully, the number of